So, dear friends, good evening, everybody. Here's Rabbi Benzion Laskin, and you are watching now our program, Conversations with Jewish Leaders. And today we have a very special guest, and we today celebrating a very special day. That's starting Bezrat Hashem on Thursday evening, Chavchet B'Sivan, Yom Yerushalayim, the day of reunification of Jerusalem. And the first moment that I remember, one of the most strongest moments I remember from last year's in the news was when Helen Thomas, a famous American journalist, she spoke once by David Nesneff, one American blogger. And he asked her about Israel. She says, Israel, you all need to go back to Poland, to Lithuania. It's not your place here. And it was a very big noise in all the press and all the news. And David Nesneff, that blogger, was invited to all the CNN channels and everything. And he didn't know what to answer, what to tell in the news. So he called Mr. Eli Wiesel, blessed of memory. And Eli Wiesel told him, David, go, you daven in Chabad, you pray with Chabad. You need to find out what was the position, the answer of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So he called one of the most closest people of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Avraham Shem Tov, who was the head of the Agudat Hasidei Chabad. And he answered him the next answer. He says, if you don't see your friend for many years, you don't really know what's the level of your friendship. If you're close enough or you're not friends anymore, you don't know. But if you're a son of somebody, it doesn't make a difference if you don't see your parents for 20 years, for 50 years, or for 70 years. You always will be the son of your parents. We're not called friends of Israel. The Jewish nation called Bnei Israel, sons of Israel. So yes, we was in exile for 2,000 years, but we have only one home. This is Israel, Eretz Israel, as we say, Torah Israel, Eretz Israel, and Am Israel, the Torah of the Jewish nation, the land of the Jewish nation, and the Bnei Israel, and our Jewish nation. It's all one. It's one entity. And this was actually his answer on CNN. We're not friends of Israel. We are children of Israel. And yes, wherever you watch now our show, in New York, in Miami, in Russia, wherever it is, our heart is in Israel. We pray every day only to one direction of Yerushalayim, of Jerusalem. And it's a great honor and pleasure that we have with us in this special day an incredible special person, a true Jewish leader, ambassador, Dani Dayan, General Consul of Israel, a person who is not only his ambassador, but in his career, he built Eretz Israel. He was the head of the Jewish settlements, Ityashvut, and a true visionary, a person who created he gave so much to Eretz Israel, and we're so happy that you're with us. And since the few years that you came to New York, you gave so much love, and you remind to so many peoples that we are sons of Israel. And thank you so much for this. And thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Rabbi Laskin.
Thank you. So, Mr. Dayan, my first question to you will be, I'm not asking now Ambassador Dayan, I'm asking the person, Dani Dayan. What's been for you, and I know you wasn't born in Israel, you was born in Argentina, you did your path, and there's a very rich path of your family. We'll talk about this later as well. But when I say Yerushalayim to any Jewish person, it makes a big difference. What's the personal meaning for you when I say the word Yerushalayim, when you hear this word?
The city, the most beloved city in the world for me. It's everything. The last Shabbat and before I came to New York, it was obvious for me that we will spend that Shabbat in Yerushalayim. We have to inhale enough air of Jerusalem, of Yerushalayim, to keep us here in New York. So we spent the Shabbat in Yerushalayim, and the following Sunday, it was a great strengthening force for me for being here. I used to tell, sometimes I tease Mayor de Blasio of New York, the mayor of the city of New York. I tell him, Mayor, I represent the capital of the world, Jerusalem, to the city that for some reason believes that is the capital of the world, New York. But the real capital of the world, the spiritual center of the world, is Yerushalayim. It means for me personally, but also, yes, for the Jewish people. You know, Rabbi Laskin, David Ben-Gurion, our first prime minister, once said that in Israel, in order to be a realist, you have to believe in miracles.
100%.
And indeed, we saw so many miracles during the the last 72 years, the establishment of Israel, the waves of Aliyah that we absorbed from all over the world, the reunification, the liberation of Yerushalayim, and now we see Israel becoming a technological superpower that gives, that brings beneficial things to the entire world. But the real greatest miracle of all, I think, happened before the establishment of Israel. And the real miracle is that we didn't forget Yerushalayim. And that is one of the basic things that kept us as a people. When the Roman Empire disappeared and the Greeks disappeared and all the other ancient people disappeared, we, in fact of the fact that we were dispersed and persecuted and oppressed and discriminated and unfortunately even massacred, and in fact, in spite of the fact that the nations of the world invested so much effort and cruelty in order to make us forget Yerushalayim, we didn't forget, and that is the great miracle. How did we do that? I think there is no other people on earth that is so linked to his capital city as Israel, as Jews are to Yerushalayim. Think about it. For 2,000 years, in every single corner of the world, in Moscow, in Buenos Aires, in Casablanca, and in Cape Town, in the most intimate moment of a couple under the chuppah, before they are going to become finally husband and wife, they pose. They don't kiss the bride, they make a pose before they do that, and they say, Meshkachech Yerushalayim, if I forget Yerushalayim. For 2,000 years, in every corner of the world, in Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the month of Av, Jews sit on the floor and weep and cry and remember Yerushalayim. There is no other comparable link of a people to its center, to its capital, like we have to Yerushalayim. You know, I will tell you one of the, I assume it's a legend, I don't think it's a real story, but I love it so much. According to one tale, Napoleon, the great French emperor, one day strolled the streets of Paris, one summer day. And he saw something weird. In the synagogues, the Jews were sitting on the floor weeping, and no light. And he asked his entourage, what's going on here? And they told him, Emperor, this is your majesty, these are the Jews, they are weeping for the destruction of their capital and their temple. And he said, how? When did that happen? How? Last week, last month, yesterday? Why I wasn't briefed about it? They told him, no, Emperor, it happened 1700 years ago. And then Napoleon said, according to that tale, a people that doesn't forget its temple, its capital for 1700 years will live to see it rebuilt. And here we are today, still without a temple, but with Yerushalayim as our capital.
It's really amazing. And this passion that we say in the prayer 60 times a day about Yerushalayim, about Jerusalem, this is what kept us and moving us. And I remember about another story with David Ben-Gurion that you just mentioned. And this story was told by Rabbi Lau. When 72, if I'm not mistaken, David Ben-Gurion called Rabbi Lau, Rabbi Israel Lau, and told him, Rabbi Lau, I have a few questions on Chumash I would like to discuss. And Rabbi Lau came to him, a very nice conversation. And then Rabbi Lau approaching to David Ben-Gurion and tell him, I have one question. There's one legend that 1937, when was the Peel Committee, when the British mandate in Eretz Israel, and they wanted to decide if to whom it belonged the land, and they called the Palestinians and they called the Jews. And David Ben Gurion, he was presenting the Jewish nation, and he was standing there, and he was asked where he was born, and David Ben Gurion answered Plonsk, and says, 1 second, all the Arab people who just spoke before you, they all was born in Eretz Israel, in Israel. And they have a Kushan, they have a paper that say that Eretz Israel belongs to them. So where's your Kushan? You was born in Poland, in Russia, in Lithuania, wherever it is. And where's your Kushan? And says, our Kushan, and then he takes the Torah. He says, our Kushan, when it says even Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, God just created the world, and the first Rashi, the first commentary says, why it says, why God start not from the story of the Jewish nation, but start from the creation of the whole world? Because if will come nations and they will tell, you took from us our land, it's not your land, you're aggressors or whatever it is, we'll answer them, the same God who created heaven and earth gave us the land of Israel. And then Rabbi Lau asked Ben Gurion one question. So Mr. Ben Gurion, if you have the Kushan, if your Kushan is the Torah, why are you taking this Torah and you ripping this? And David Ben Gurion is a very smart person. He didn't answer this question. My question to you is, what would be your answer on this and your reflection?
Well, first of all, your story also reminds me of a speech that I identify with it so much. The speech that the famous Israeli writer Shai Agnon delivered in Stockholm in 1966 when he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. And when you receive the Nobel Prize, there is a ceremony, you speak in front of the King of Sweden and many other dignitaries. And Shmuel Yosef Agnon, is known also as Shai Agnon, started his speech with a beautiful saying that it was even printed in the $50 shekel bill. He said, I was born in one of the towns of the exile in Ukraine. Because of a historic accident that the Romans destroyed Jerusalem in the year 70. But from day one, as I was born, I saw myself as a native of Jerusalem. And I think that every Jew has to see himself or herself as a native of Jerusalem. I that was born also in one of the cities of the exile in Buenos Aires, I also see myself as a native of Jerusalem. And I entered public life mainly because of that. Because it was important for me to make sure that Israel preserves the historical treasures that we liberated exactly 53 years ago in Tafshin Kav Zayin, 1967. And Baruch Hashem, I think that we are in the right direction in that respect. I myself didn't move. I lived in Tel Aviv. I didn't move to Yerushalayim, but I lived to Shomron, which is an area that also was under danger that will be taken from us.
Thank God. And really the story with the Kushan that I just said is because I heard once in one of your interviews, when many people in Israel says, we in Israel here, we Israelim, we're not only Yehudim, not only Jews, but that conversation of Rabbi Lau and Ben Gurion was that the Kushan, the whole connection to our land is only because of the Torah. And I heard this in your speeches in many places where you spoke so strongly about this. And even I remember your speech when Ehud Olmert, I think in 2000, was ready in his conversation to give the Western world that today we're celebrating, to give it to the king of... so you always was a very big... So about this connection, I just want to a little bit to speak about your personal relationship to the connection. And also, you moved from Argentina to Eretz Israel. My name is Benzion, son of Jerusalem, son of Zion. Our parents in the exile was giving us those names because of the love to Israel, the love to the Torah, to all our values. So I want a little bit to speak about your connection to the Kushan, to the Torah, to the.
Well, as you said, I was born in Argentina. My family comes from Eastern Europe, from different parts of Eastern Europe. My paternal family comes from what is today Ukraine. My maternal side is from Bessarabia, Moldova today, and Belarus. And they moved to Argentina before the war, before the Shoah, long before the Shoah. So they were far away during those tragic days. But since the day I was born, I remember, we knew that one day we will move to Eretz Israel. And I think that, I remember the days as an 18-year-old boy in Buenos Aires. I remember the days of preceding the Six-Day War. Today, people can say, call me different stories and distort history, but I remember as a child in a deeply Jewish home in Buenos Aires with family in Eretz Israel, the anguish, the exasperation that Israel might be annihilated, chas v'chalila. I remember the chilling threats that the Arab leaders made about throwing the Jews of Palestine into the sea. Regarding what you say about Ellen Thomas, there was the head of the PLO that said all the Jews, we will expel them to their countries, Poland and Russia, etc., but it will not be a big problem because not many will survive the war. We will kill most of them. So today, when they say that it was not a defensive war, it was an aggression, etc., that's nonsense. And then I remember the joy, the incredible joy when, again, it's a miracle, in 6 days, Israel repelled that attack and liberated Yerushalayim and Hebron and Shechem and Yericho and all the places that we studied about in the Hebrew school. I studied about in the Hebrew school in Buenos Aires as a child. And those were days really of incredible joy. And then we made the final decision that we have to be part of that story. We have to be in Eretz Israel. I sometimes say that it's the choice between being a spectator and being a protagonist in the most amazing story of the Jewish people in the last 2,000 years. And we moved to Israel, and that was obviously the best decision of my family's life. I have a very deep sense of history. I don't see myself as only as a Jew in the year 2020, but I see myself as part of a link, of a chain. I see myself as a link in a chain that started with Avraham Avinu and goes through David HaMelech and the Nevi'im, and also a chain that has very tragic links of persecution and dispersion and oppression and a massacre. And that's the reason that, I believe that in these days we have, as our contemporary Jewish generation, we have 2 extra mitzvot in addition to the 613 mitzvot of the Torah. One is to keep the Jewish state, Israel, strong and thriving and secure and robust. And the second is to guarantee the continuity of Jewish life elsewhere, in all the places in which we have Jewish communities to make sure that not in our generation or in the generation of our children or grandchildren, that chain is broken. And yes, I tried to dedicate my life after I was quite successful in the business life. I now try to dedicate my life to those two mitzvot, to help Israel to remain strong and thriving, and to help Am Israel to remain, the people of Israel, Bnei Israel, to remain strong and resilient.
Amen, amen. And thank you so much for this mission that you're carrying with so much love. And really, you came to one of the not easiest place, New York City, that we love so much. And so, and the last 2 years, especially the last 2 years, I would say, the anti-Semitism in general here went so high. And my question to you is, how are we fighting with it, and how the Israeli consulate fight with it? And I know it was a story with which university was, I forgot, it was, I think, in Hart.
There are many. Yeah. Look, I must admit that I was naive. I thought that after the price that the world pay, not the Jews, they don't care about the Jews, but the entire world paid for the scourge of anti-Semitism, for Hitler and יימח שמו. I thought that at least for a century or two they will give us a break in their hatred of the Jews. But as I said, I was naive. This is something that is ingrained in the culture of the world, the nations of the world, to hate the Jews. Again, I must admit that for many years I wasn't a person that that sees anti-Semitism everywhere. But then when I came to this country, and in my worst nightmares, I didn't expect that in my short period here in this country, 15 Jews were murdered for being Jews. 11 in Pittsburgh, 1 in Poway, California, 2 in Jersey City, and 1 in Muncie. We know that, unfortunately, he passed away a few months after he was attacked. So 15 Jews assassinated by anti-Semites in less than 2 years. That's terrible. And from those 15, 14 were in the areas that I cover. I cover New York, I cover Pennsylvania, and other states, but I spent my entire week in Pittsburgh after I was in the Levayot, I was in the Shiva, and it was no doubt the most difficult week that I had here in this country. And in order to fight anti-Semitism, first of all, we immediately show solidarity. I was in Pittsburgh, I was in Jersey City, I was in Muncie. Immediately. But we have to understand what are we fighting in order to fight it wisely. There are 4 different types of anti-Semitism that converge, that create a synergy between them. There is the white supremacist, neo-Nazi, old bad anti-Semitism. There is something that is relatively new, black ideological anti-Semitism, Louis Farrakhan and the perpetrators in Jersey City and in Muncie. And then there is the hooligans, that it's not an ideology, but it is a hooliganist hate of Jews that we see in Brooklyn, taking the wig out of a Haredi woman's head, or the Streimel, etc., etc. And then there is the 4th one, which disguises itself as anti-Israel, but actually is another type of anti-Semitism, by the way, but probably in the meantime is the less lethal, but is very, very dangerous. So we have 4 different types of anti-Semitism that create a synergy that no, we now I say, look, you ask about our, we don't have authority to act in the United States. We don't have police here. We don't have an education system here. But the fact that we don't have authority doesn't mean we don't have responsibility. We do have responsibility. An anti-Semitic act, even if it happens thousands of miles from Israel, is domestic news for us, is local news for us. And in every single meeting with city, state, and federal officials, we raise this issue, and we are extremely aggressive tackling that, demanding action, and as much as we can, also acting, but strengthening the communities, giving them our back.
In your meetings, in your events here, did you saw events of anti-Semitism during your speeches, or?
Well, yes, I was. I saw mostly, the anti-Israel, the anti-Semitism that these guys was anti-Israeli. I saw it in almost in every campus that I go. I see the hatred towards the Jewish state from demonstrators. Sometimes it's inside the room in which I speak. Sometimes it's outside the room which I speak. Rabbi Laskin, the first time it happened to me, I think it was in City College in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke there, and when I started to speak, as a group of students started to make a demonstration strongly, and probably it would have been violent also unless. So the following day, the president of the college called me to apologize. And I told him, Mr. President, look, I'm not worried about my First Amendment rights. I can speak wherever I want. I have many places in which I can speak. I am not concerned about my physical security. I go everywhere with Israeli security agents. They are the best in the world, and they will, I hope they will, and they will never need it, but they will give their lives to protect. But I am concerned about the First Amendment rights and the physical security of the Jewish students in York College that are being intimidated, attacked, aggressions against them, and that is unbearable. You have to take actions. I said that to the president of Columbia University, to the president of NYU. It's not enough to condemn anti-Semitic acts against Jewish students, even if it's disguised anti-Israelism, anti-Zionism, by condemning them afterwards. You have to do proactive action, educational and law enforcement action, because, Rabbi Laskin, I think that we are not in, I don't want to exaggerate, I don't want anybody to exaggerate. We are not in Germany of the 30s, okay? The United States in 2020 is not Germany in 1935. But there is one difference between us and our brethren then, and that is that we are now experienced. And we know what can happen even in the civilized world. Germany was the most civilized country in the world. What can happen even in the civilized world if anti-Semitism is not thwarted immediately, when it is small. We can't afford to wait until it becomes a strong movement. We have to take action now. That is the meaning of never again. And also there is the Iranian anti-Semitism that, yesterday the spiritual leader of Iran, that's also funny to call him spiritual, he's a bigot. Khamenei published a poster with Arabs celebrate and Muslims celebrating the liberation of Jerusalem, and the headline was the final solution, exactly the exact words that Adolf Hitler used. So we have to take, the world has to, we take it seriously, but also the world has to take seriously that anti-Semitism.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Dayan. And I would need to say that since you came here, I'm a rabbi in the community, I felt it so much, your activity here and how the community accepted you with so much love. The question is if not the community, the UN and all the other places where you've been, if you found in New York a place where they're really able to hear, to listen, to accept.
We make an effort. We make an effort. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we don't. I didn't come to New York to preach to the choir, to convince the already convinced. On the contrary, I came to speak with those that still needed to be convinced and to be brought closer to Israel. For instance, one of the communities that I dedicate a lot of effort and time is the Latino community, also because I myself come from Argentina and speak fluent Spanish, but also because it's important politically and socially in this country. I think it will become more and more important. So, for instance, the Latino community, I think we had great success in reaching out today to them, but that doesn't mean that we have a 100% rate of success. For instance, although I have extremely friendly relations with all the congressional delegation of New York State in Washington, in the Congress in Washington, but unfortunately with AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I wasn't able to meet. She wouldn't meet an Israeli representative, and I am sorry for that. I think that dialogue can bring us to better places than disconnect.
100%. 100%. So he's coming the question. You, as a leader of the community, as a leader of Israel that now with us here, and you see the situation, what's happening now in New York. What's your advice for us, for the Jews now that living here in New York, in the United States? Because never was anything similar to the situation we now in America. What we can do, what we should do, what can be done?
Well, stand strong and tall and never bow your head. Be proud Jews. If needed, defend yourself. But I think that the most important thing is not to hide, to display your Jewishness, to be proud of your Jewishness. And if people think that by hiding Jewish signs, that will help, in the contrary. And always remember that, thank God, the Jews have today a state, and that state will always welcome any Jew in distress or not in distress. Any Jew will be welcomed in Eretz Israel.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Dayan, you today the Ambassador, General Consul of Israel in New York. But you're not only in your family. Your father, I know, he was the Moshe Dayan. He was the ambassador of Israel in Guatemala.
That's correct.
So I understand you continue a legacy of the family. And there's another secret of your family that's we're going to celebrate now the 6-Day War. That was the unification of Jerusalem. And Moshe Dayan, the legendary general and Minister of Defense, who won this war. He was I believe,
He was, I would say, a second-degree cousin of my dad. My dad, my late father, his name was also Moshe Dayan, and the famous Moshe Dayan is with one eye, and my dad, Moshe Dayan, with two eyes. They had a common great-grandfather. The family comes from Ukraine. from a town in Ukraine named Zhashkov. Is more or less 60 miles, something like that, south of Kiev, in the way from Kiev to Uman, and if you continue south to Odessa. And my dad was born there. My dad was born in Ukraine, and he arrived to Argentina with his parents, obviously, when he was 7. The other part of the family came to Eretz Israel, towards then Palestine. And we reunited when we made Aliyah in the 70s. So yeah, formally at least we are family. I can't say there were strong family ties because, you know, once I was in Argentina, they are in Israel, so I can't say there was a strong family connection, but yes, at least formally we are. But you know, Rabbi, I want to tell you a story about my dad, if I can.
Please.
My dad was born, as I told you, in Zhashkov in 1920. We forgot because later came the Shoah, but also and then in Ukraine there were terrible pogroms, and tens of thousands of Jews were killed in those pogroms by Ukrainian nationalists. And finally, a pogrom occurred also in Zhashkov, and the family had to flee to escape. So they decided to move to Poland. So they went to the border between the Ukrainian-Polish border. Now the border is not there anymore, but that was before the war. And they waited for a dark night without a moon, and to cross the border to Poland, to the very relative safety of Poland. But there was a problem. My dad was 6 months old.
Wow.
So my Bobe, my grandmother, they feared that he will cry and the police will find them, the army, the police. So she put my dad into a potato sack and muffled his mouth with a cloth. And that's the way my dad crossed for the first time in his life an international border, inside the potato sack with a cloth in, not a mask like today, a tight cloth on his mouth. And when they arrived to the Polish side, my Bobe opened the sack to see if he's alive. And thank God he was alive. So they stayed for 7 years in Poland as illegal immigrants, and then they moved to Argentina. And I thought about that story a lot when I arrived to New York. Here, he crossed the first time in his life a border inside the potato sack, my father, and here I am crossing with an diplomatic passport of the State of Israel in an aircraft in which the pilot speaks Hebrew, and El Al aircraft, and the police in New York was waiting for me to protect me and not to haunt me. And that's the way that not only my family, the entire Jewish people made, thanks to the existence of a Jewish state.
It's an amazing story. It's incredible. It reminds me when Golda Meir, she was in Moscow, in Russia.
Ambassador.
Yes, and she came to the synagogue in Moscow. So the whole shul was so packed. When she came, was no space there. And she came to every Jew, and she said only one thing: "Thank you so much for staying Jewish." This was the only words.
Exactly.
And that we today here together, it means that 4 generations back, 5 generations back, our parents, our family, had so much mesut nefesh, had so much sacrifice to stay Jewish in a sack of potatoes, as you said. And I think that I'm sure that moment that you came here as an ambassador and continuing the legacy of your father, and I'm sure probably this love towards Israel coming also from your father and your mother.
Yes, definitely. My family, my father, my mother that passed away a few months ago were strong. I mean, they educated me to be a strong, proud Jew, and to for me, is the most important definition I have is first of all a Jew. All other things are secondary to being a Jew. You know, when my former deputy consul general left here and went back to Israel, he told me something that for me is a badge of honor. He said he never saw such a Jew lover like me. So yes, I love Jews in all shapes and colors.
This is amazing, and thank God we always continue this love, always. So, you know, Ambassador Dayan, I remember, you know, the New York Times, they wrote about you that you're one of the most prominent leaders of the settlers. And before you became the general consul, you did it so much for the settlements. You live in the settlement. I know your wife also, she worked for Ariel University. So the whole family, it's a family project. And, you know, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he was one of the strongest opponents of to give out Eretz Israel, any piece of land. He spoke so much about Shlemut Haaretz. He was explaining that if I would like one day to sell you the Brooklyn Bridge and we can have a good deal, but I don't owe the Brooklyn Bridge. So he was saying that when God gave the land of Israel to Am Israel, he didn't give it so we'll give it to other people. And I know in Israel, he was a very big fighter for Shlemut Haaretz. He was one of the first people who spoke against of two medinot, two countries, two states. I would love, if possible, if you can speak about this and what's how you see the solution. And
well, you know, I have to be cautious now that I am a diplomat. I sometimes joke that it's for the first time in my life since in the last, 40 years since I was discharged from the army that I'm not free to say anything I want to say as a diplomat. In a few months, by the way, I will go back to Israel and will be again a free person. But yes, you know, that is one of the greatest debates in Israeli politics, in Israel, greatest ideological debates. I dedicated, as you said, a significant part of my life, both my personal life, moving from the comfort of Tel Aviv. I could have stayed in Tel Aviv to a very precarious house in Shomron. Later, I built a nicer one. And also my public life. I believe, as in every word that you said about the importance of Eretz Israel in its entirety, and I was for 6 years the chairman of the Yesha Council, Yehuda Shomron, which is the umbrella organization of our movement. For 2 years, I also, in addition to those 6 years of chairman, I was for 2 years I established a kind of international arm of the movement. I used to come very frequently to Washington, to London, to the capitals of the world to advocate for Yehuda Shomron. That gave me basically my first diplomatic experience that I use now as a formal diplomat. Without entering my personal opinions, I will say that today we have in Yehuda Shomron almost 500,000 Jews.
It's amazing.
When you think how that started 50 years ago with the Seder Pesach in Hebron that no one believed that will last for more than the Pesach week is really incredible. Also, there are more than 200 and 250,000 Jews in the new neighborhoods of Yerushalayim. It was once was Eastern Yerushalayim. So basically, we have 750, probably 800,000 Jews living in the areas that were liberated in the Six-Day War in 1967. And there are those that believe that there is a point of no return, and I will not argue with those that say that we crossed the point of no return.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this answer. I understand the limitations. And I want to remind also all our viewers and listeners that you can ask now in live in the comments a question. I see here one of our, you write, your essence is unreviled and divine, and like all rivers to the ocean's flow, with too enjoy or sorrow toward you go, to you we strive, Jerusalem, our shrine. So the love of the Jewish nation is unbelievable, and this is what holds us. And I remember when Rabbi Frankel, the grandfather of
Rabbi Lau.
Rabbi Lau. So when he came to Israel, to Palestine, and he was asked to swear that he was born in Israel, and he was a religious Jew, he cannot do it. And he asked his rabbi, "Can I do it?" He says, "Listen, moment you're born, you only bring to one place. So because you think all the time in Jerusalem, where is the person? Wherever he thinks. So you in Israel, feel free to say it." So my question to you is, after so many years now, finishing a few months, your mission here, your shlichut here in Israel, I would like to ask you about the community here, the specialty of the community here. Anything you can share?
Well, Laskin, that's interesting. When I came here to New York, I had a feeling of deja vu. And I asked myself why. I've been to New York many times before, but I never lived in New York. So why do I feel familiar as I returned? And my answer is that after so many years in Israel, I suddenly remember that, yes, you can be a Jew outside Israel, and there is Jewish life outside of Israel. I remembered my life in Argentina, I think that we have problems. I am worried about the future of the community. There are challenges. But I think I nevertheless live optimistic. But I will tell you, I said earlier that our contemporary Jewish generation has 2 extra mitzvahs in addition to Taryag mitzvot, to the 613 mitzvot. One is to maintain the Jewish state. The other is to guarantee continuation of Jewish life. What I tell myself frequently is that we must ensure that each one of the 2 large Jewish communities, Israel and America, sees itself as responsible for both. There is a danger that Israeli Jews will see themselves as responsible for the existence of Israel, and American Jews will see themselves as responsible for the continuation of Jewish life here. No, we need a cross-responsibility. We need a mutual responsibility. Israeli Jews should see themselves as taking upon themselves both mitzvahs, Israel and the brethren across the ocean, and American Jews should see themselves committed to both mitzvot.
Okay, so we're back. We apologize for the interruption. Mr. Ambassador Dayan, please.
So as I said, we have each Jewish community, or each Jew has to see himself or herself as committed to both those mitzvot. And I hope it will happen. I'm not so worried about what will be the headline tomorrow in the newspaper tomorrow about relations between Israel and American Jewish community. I am worried what will be written in the Jewish history book that will be written 100 years from now. 100%. And sometimes I'm afraid that it will say, that book, that we departed into two separate tribes, or worse than that, that we lost a large part of one of those tribes. And yes, I'm sure that as I dedicated my public and personal life for many years to the issue of Eretz Israel, from now on I will also dedicate it to the issue of Jewish life all over the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And you really spoke so painful and so true. Only in the moment we realize we are one, then there is a path for survival, for continuation, Bezrat Hashem. And I remember last time when we met, it was when you was our keynote speaker at the National Russian Shabbaton, one of the largest events for the Russian Jewish speaking.
An amazing event
in Connecticut.
An unforgettable event, yes.
Thank you so much. And the people didn't forget about your unbelievable speech that you gave on Motzei Shabbat. And who can believe it was February 27th, if I'm not mistaken. And a few days afterwards, we're still in the homes, in the quarantine. Yeah. And I don't think you used to celebrate Yom Yerushalayim or anything on Zoom or on all the platform that we revealed suddenly.
You know, it's a great thing that the Kadosh Baruch Hu created the Zoom.
Exactly. But on Pesach Seder, it wasn't easy when people was in their homes and everything. So how are you going through this? What's your message? What's your lesson from it? And how the consulate in general is continuing now?
Well, you know, it's challenging. I will tell you what's the thing that bothers me, bothers me most. In the consulate we had, even myself was quarantined for 14 days with one of my security agents that was with me an entire day, was tested positive, but that's not the issue. The issue is the heavy price that the Jewish community paid for the coronavirus, and the frustration. I told you that when the shooting in Pittsburgh happened, I flew immediately to Pittsburgh. When Jersey City happened, I went immediately there, Monsey. And here we are. I see so many levayot of Jews, Rahman al-Itzlan, and you can't even come to show solidarity because of there is no place I would come to a minyan, but a minyan, you can't have a minyan. So in Williamsburg or in Lakewood or in Crown Heights. So that is very difficult for me to see what is happening in the Jewish community and not be able to be there in order to show solidarity and empathy. And for me, that was and still is extremely difficult.
To all of us, and we all pray for everybody who is in our communities. We have, unfortunately, so many people who are still sick, and we all pray for them and trying to get stronger from these not easy times. But, you know, one of the ideas that people say that now we're in the homes. Before we was 10,000 events together, but sometimes we're so far away from each other. There's so much sinat chinam and so much hatred between ourselves. And now it's a time to reconsider, to call people who you don't speak usually, to become more closer. And, you know, I'm as a person who was, thank God, I did Aliyah when I was 2 years old. And I grew up all my life in Israel. I went here to New York to Shlichut. And one of the most painful things for me, and when I came to New York, I saw I'm as a religious Jew, as a rabbi, was nothing. Maybe they would be ignorant. They might be ignorant here. I don't care about religious. I don't want whatever it is. But there was no negative emotions. In Israel, unfortunately, because of many, many reasons, we're not getting to the thing, but especially in the last years, there's so much, sometimes it's them, it's ours, so much separation.
Yeah,
in this.
You know, sometimes is a Jewish problem that from all over the history of those differences and the separations, and you know the Jewish joke about the shul that you will never visit.
Yes, it's a classical, it's a staple.
So but you know, Rabbi Laskin, you asked me before we started if I ever met the Rabbi,
yes.
Lubavitcher. And I would like to tell you that story because
Please.
I didn't tell you. My first visit to New York was in December 1978. It was Hanukkah. And I was 20-something. I was alone here for a week, and I'm mostly in Manhattan. And I wanted to see what it's all about the Chabad area in Crown Heights. So I took a subway to Crown Heights. And in the subway, I saw a person that obviously he's Jewish by his appearance. So I approached him. I told him, can you show me the direction to 7070? And he said, who are you? I said, just a young person visiting from Israel. I wanted to see the place. I heard so much about Chabad, about the Rebbe, about the activities. He said, come with me. He took me by my arm to 7070 from the subway station and into the building. I don't know to this day who that person was, by the way. And he took me to a small room, a very small room. And there were nine Jews there. I didn't understand what's happening. And suddenly the other door, the opposite door of the room opened, and the Rebbe marched in for Mincha. So I had the privilege to daven Mincha with the Rebbe. And later there was Itvadut for Hanukkah. I received
gathering.
Exactly, I received $1 from the Rebbe, and it
Blessing.
was a great experience that I will never forget to the last day of my life. And my family in Ukraine, actually also Moshe Dayan's family, is originally a Hasidic family, although a different Hasidut square. And here in New York, I developed a very warm connection with the Square Rebbe. He invites me to his simches, and he sends me matzah shmura before Pesach and many other things. So I also have strong Hasidic roots.
Amazing. And the most important, strong neshama.
I do my best.
Brings so much light, thank God. And your family continues the traditions, everything. You have a very strong traditions in the family.
Yes.
So, Ambassador Dayan, first of all, thank you so much for your time and everything.
You.
And I want to finish our conversation because we speak about Yerushalayim, about Jerusalem. And one of the moments when it happened, when Akotel Beyadenu, when these words. So before these words came, I remember was the night. Correct me if I don't remember something, but when Menachem Begin. It was the night before he heard in BBC. He was used to listen to BBC, the news. He heard in BBC that tomorrow will be a ceasefire, and Israel won't be able to do anything anymore. And he called Levi Eshkol, and was the historical moment of the pajama meeting. And Levi Eshkol didn't want to, but he pushed, and they meet. And in the morning, our soldiers entered, and then the soldiers went touched the stones of the Kotel. It was not only their tears, it was tears of thousands of tears of Jews of generations. And one of the moments that me personally speaks to me very much, it says that there's 4 names of the Satan, of the evil inclination. So in the Midrash, it says Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, Satan, the Satan, Malach HaMavet, the angel of death, and the 4th name is Machar, tomorrow. And if you would think for 1 second, what would happen if Menachem Begin wouldn't, everything is from Hashem, convince Levi Eshkol to do it, we'll never know. So my question, and by the way, the Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke so much when Jews were so afraid of Sheshet Hayamim, this one of the biggest miracles of our generation. And he sent all the Hasidim to go to put it tefillin, and he says, don't worry, it will happen. And he said in the prophecy. But my question to you is on a personal maybe note. So many things in life, if we don't do it now, it's part of the Satan's plan. So in your life, things that you're happy that you did it on time, or Anything that
Well,
are the opposite?
well, first of all, for sure, the Aliyah to Eretz Israel, and I also am very glad that I accepted immediately the request of Prime Minister Netanyahu to represent the State of Israel to the largest Jewish community in the world. I see the to be the Consul General of Israel to New York has many aspects. We are actually the largest diplomatic mission of Israel in the world. But for me, it's first and foremost to be the ambassador of Israel to the largest Jewish community in the world. And that's for me the most important thing. I am very glad that he offered me the position.
And we're so glad that he did it.
That,
yes.
That I accepted it immediately, right. Without reservation. Probably if we had started to think and this and that, but I didn't think for a second, and I said I will do it gladly.
So and I'm speaking now from the name of the whole community here, we are so grateful that you did it on time and Prime Minister offered you. And my question to you is, what's your message before we finish to all our viewers, listeners, to our community?
Well,
on this special day.
Yeah. To be Jewish means to remember. To be Jewish means to remember the good things that happened to us and the bad things to happen to us. To this day, we remember thousands of years ago who was our benefactor and who was our detractor. We remember Amalek, and we remember those that helped us in the desert or in other instances in our history. We remember which countries helped Jews during the Shoah, which countries collaborated with the Nazis. One of the stories that I love is, again, I'm not sure it's accurate, but an American president asked even Ben-Gurion, or probably Levi Eshkol, or Golda Meir, it's not important who, about what's your connection to this land there, and he said, I think it was Ben-Gurion, he said, look, go outside in the Waldorf Astoria in hotel in New York, go outside to the lobby and ask an American child the name of the captain of the Mayflower and what was the name of this and that, and he doesn't have no idea. But you will ask a Jewish child anywhere in the world, who took you out from Egypt, who was his successor, every detail of what happened that's 4,000 years ago, then in Eretz Israel, he knows. So our secret is that we don't live only in the present, but we also live in the past and in the future, looking for the future of the Jewish people. And there is no more important thing than to preserve the Jewish people. There is no more important thing than to preserve the Jewish people. You know, I go to I told you, to the weddings of the grandchildren of the Skverer Rebbe, and look, they are very different from me. Very different. But I am so glad, so joyous. And I ask myself why I'm so joyous if they are so different from me. And my answer is that I know that their children and grandchildren will remain Jewish. And that's the most important thing. So let's do all together an effort to adhere to our Judaism, to keep it and to make it even stronger, and to, as Chabad does and you personally do, to bring closer those Jews that have now are far from Judaism. That is one of the two greatest missions of our generation. The second, as I said, is Eretz Israel, Medinat Israel.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Dayan, for this
Thank you, Rabbi Laskin.
conversation. And I just want to wish you the words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe that he said to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu when he was in the UN, and Prime Minister Netanyahu always remind these words that when you're coming to a place of darkness, always remember that you have the light and you need to light this candle of light, of truth. So may Hashem always help you to continue to bring this light to even the most darkest
Amen.
places. And thank you
Amen.
for doing this for our
Thank
community
you
for
so
so
much.
many years. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank
All
you.
the best. Thank you, my dear friends. This was with us Ambassador Dani Dayan. Our first part of the conversation, you can see before was some interruption before, so this is only the second part. You can see the beginning of our conversation. And I want to remind you, please subscribe to our channel, Benzion Laskin, Rabbi Laskin, to see our next interesting videos and conversations with Jewish leaders. And also on our YouTube channel of Rabbi Benzion Laskin, you can see also all our programs and the lectures on Torah and Kabbalah, everything on this channel. Thank you so much for watching, my dear friends. Please be safe and Erev Tov. Thank you, my dear. And I want also to thank the World Zionist Organization for helping us, for making this event tonight. Thank you so much again, everybody. Thank you.